Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on what time you are listening to this. This is Dual Credit U.S. History, Chapter 1, The Collision of Cultures. To start off, we are going to listen to what the author of the book has to say about Spain and the New World. Okay, now you get to listen to me. Alright, so we're going to start with pre-Columbian Indian civilizations. So with the early cultures, we have the Mayas, the Aztecs, the Chibchas, and the Incas. So a little bit of information. First, the first settlers to Americas were nomadic. So remember, they came across the Bering Strait. They followed the herds of animals that they hunted. And as the game moved south, so did the hunters. And that is what allowed the land to get populated as they traveled. Eventually, you do get some permanent farming towns. They start to emerge in Mexico about 2000 BC. And that is populated by the Mayans. The Mayan culture does eventually collapse and is replaced by that of the Aztecs. So that's what happens with the Mayans. They're kind of replaced by the Aztecs. Further south, in present-day Colombia, you have the Chibchas, who would build an empire similar to that of the Aztecs, but on a much, much smaller scale, which is why you don't hear about them any near as much. If you recall, the Incas are going to be down further South America, in the Andes Mountains. Okay, so we have some artwork to check out. So the Aztecs, they were renowned for their military prowess. They would capture and then sacrifice their enemies. Remember, we talked about the human sacrifice. So they sacrificed humans because they thought it would bring them the favor of the gods and make them more successful, more productive. All right, so that's a little bit about Indian cultures in Central and South America. So now we have several that are in North America. They do differ a little bit from what's going on in Central America, from the farm communities and cities that are down there. They do have a tendency to be a little bit more nomadic. The forests and the grasslands were not as hospitable for cultivation. So it's not until they get further east that they really start to kind of settle down and start farming and whatnot. There are 3 distinct periods of civilization during this time period. So you have the Adena Hopo culture, which flourishes in the Midwest between 800 BC and 600 AD. You have the Mississippian culture, which occupies the second era, between 8930 and 1350. And you have the Anasazi, which still exists and has lasted from 400 BC to the present. There are the people we think of when we consider the Native American society and culture. Excuse me. Sorry. I had to sneeze. It's part of life, I guess. Okay. So those are kind of our pre-Columbian, but now we get to 1500 where we start to get the explorers start coming in. So as far as North America is concerned, when the first Europeans arrived, there's about 10 million Native Americans who lived in the New World. And these numbers are not exact, they're not proven, they are estimates. because there's really no way to prove it. There was too much death by disease to really get a solid figure on the number of peoples that lived here. The Eastern Woodland tribes, they're composed of 3 regional groups. You have the Algonquin, the Iroquois, and the Muskegon. So each of these have subgroups within them. But primarily, they're fishers and hunters. The Eastern Woodlands are along the eastern seacoast, along the Atlantic Ocean. They do some rudimentary farming as well, but mostly fishers and hunters. You have the Plains Indians on the Great Plains of North America. So if you remember, that is Arizona, New Mexico, western Texas. Again, principally nomadic. They would follow the great herds of bison that provided them their primary sustenance. And the western tribes, that's going to be your Pacific Northwest, especially involved in fishing, whaling, and sealing. Okay. So this is an Algonquin chief in his war paint. This is from the Notebook of English settler John White. This is an illustration that he did, and it does depict an Indian chief. Okay. Moving on over to the Renaissance geography. So in Europe, the 15th century is an age of technological advancement. There is a lot going on in Europe in the 1500s. In the 1400s, 1500s, as far as just change in technology, change in innovation, change in ideas. This is where you get the great Renaissance art. You have the compass, you have the astrolabe that allows for more accurate maps. And these are going to start to spur the development of trade. The rise of trade fosters the growth of towns and the creation of larger ships to carry products. So remember the caravel to kind of meander over the crazy African seas to make sure that they're safe in treacherous waters. Let's see. Oh, here are the caravels. So prior to the 15th century, shipping trading was expensive. It was dangerous. Not a lot of people had money to pay for the shipping, and even few were willing to risk it on such a venture. Basically, it's like gambling. They don't really know what's going to happen, so they're very cautious. The rise of the nation state and the consolidation of empires under centralized rulers do allow for the creation of a uniform currency within the area. Some trade reform and the abolition of trade barriers, getting rid of trade barriers, creates vast sums of wealth that can be used to finance sea trade. And your countries most largely involved are going to be England, France, Portugal, and Spain. They all have a lot of money and a lot of investment in trade. All right, my favorite guy, Christopher Columbus. Anyway, Columbus, he's an Italian guy. He's educated in Portugal. He couldn't get the Italians on board with his plan to sail across the Atlantic Ocean looking for a westward passage to Asia, so he makes it over to Spain, and he convinces King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella to finance his trip. And they actually financed that trip and then 3 further trips beyond that. When he originally goes, he sails with his 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. They land in the Bahamas. He is convinced that he's landed on an island off the coast of Asia. Later voyages would look for a western passage with no luck. He never realizes that he is in a new country to them. He never realizes he has not made it over to the Indies or to India. He thinks that he is, and he's found a passage, but he does not ever do that. America is named for Amerigo Vespucci, who's a map maker, and he is the first one to realize in 1499 that it was too large to be an island, so therefore it must be a continent, and not India or China like was suspected. And so America is named after Amerigo Vespucci. All right. So here are Columbus's voyages. How many trips does he take? He makes 4 trips. And then if you remember, so his first trip, 1492, he goes to Bahamas. He kind of travels his way to San Salvador, Hispaniola, and remember he leaves several of his men, I think 43 or something like that, in Hispaniola, before traveling back to Spain to tell him how successful his trip was and to get more money to fund other trips. He comes back the next year in 1493. He goes back to Hispaniola, and he realizes how terrible these guys have been. They have raped, they have pillaged, they have murdered, they have done all kinds of terrible things. He does head back. He comes back 1498, a lot further south, the Cape Verde Islands, Trinidad. And then his final voyage is in 1502. He makes it all the way over to Jamaica and the coast of Central America. All right. So, after Columbus, or during the time of Columbus, you have what's called professional explorers. Basically what they do for their job. They're sponsored by nation states. The new profession, it's a new profession. They cite new lands and nations. They could claim their soil, thus making the profession very desirable. That makes sense. Basically, they're able to kind of go out, scout out new lands, claim them for their country, earn wealth and whatnot, and it makes it profitable. John Cabot discovers a new found land, which would become Canada, and gave his sponsor, King Henry VII of England, claim to all of North America. Balboa, he's going to become the first European to see the Pacific Ocean from the New World. And he landed on the Isthmus of Panama and traveled west. And then you have our friend Ferdinand Magellan. They are the first to circumnavigate the globe, meaning they do go all the way around. Although Magellan does not live to complete the voyage. But his crew does. Alright. So as exploration is going on, you have a lot of things going on religious-wise over in Europe. You get the Protestant Revolution. Let's see. So Spain's colonizing the Americas. The rest of Europe is really kind of at war with each other as far as Protestant Reformation is concerned. England and France are the only nations that are really capable of contesting Spanish settlements in the New World. But they're kind of busy fighting wars with each other about religion and all that kind of stuff. And it uses up a lot of their time and their resources. We have Martin Luther, who is a priest in Germany. And he starts to really question the Catholic Church. He begins the Reformation by claiming that there's a list of abuses of the Catholic Church, one of them being indulgences, meaning you can pay to go to church, basically. Go to heaven, I'm sorry, not to church. You don't have to pay to go to church. Alright, then you have John Calvin about 30 years later, because Martin Luther's 1517 and John Calvin's in the 1530s. He writes a book, and it's going to really change the way that Christianity is preached. And this brings it kind of to another extreme, really persuading people to live by the Bible and not by the church's teachings alone. And it kind of takes them away from Catholicism. You have Reformation going on in England. We talked a lot about this because Henry VIII is one of my most interesting people in history. He wants a divorce or an annulment. The Catholic Church won't grant it. Everything else is going crazy in Europe. And he said, well, I'll just start my own church. So he starts the Church of England and puts himself in charge of it because that's just who he is. Let's see. Spanish Empire. So you have the Treaty of Tordesillas of 1494 between Spain and Portugal. They're right next to each other, so they're always kind of posed for war and whatnot. But they have the best ability for water exploration. So Spain is granted all the rights to the New World. And it really wastes no time in establishing itself in the New World, and within a generation had inserted itself firmly into civilizations there. Really became part of the continent over there. Largely Central and South America, but they do have portions of North America, Florida and Louisiana area, the Gulf Coast. They do take over a lot of those areas as well. They do have the upper hand. Spain has significant technological advancements over the tribes that are in Mexico. They have iron, they have sail-powered ships, they have cannons, they have domesticated horses. All these things are really going to allow them to kind of overtake the Indians fairly easily, even though they are tremendously outnumbered by the Native Americans. There is an influx of disease, smallpox, especially with the Aztec Empire, that they bring with them, and this actually helps their success as well. And again, it's not like they woke up and said, "Oh, I think I'm going to bring some disease to the New World. That'll show those people." I mean, it was just kind of a consequence. Somebody was carrying it, and it got spread to a bunch of people who had actually no immunities towards it. So you have Hernan Cortez. He's a Spanish conquistador. He led the first assault on the Aztec Empire. So at first, they're kind of there with their conquistadors, and there's not very many of them. They do take over Montezuma, make him do some things, but then when the people decide that Montezuma is a traitor, they go to fight back. And this is when Cortez kind of sits back and lets the smallpox do its thing. And he does get himself a lot of allies of Native Americans who hate the Aztecs. So that helps him out some too. Okay, so this is a page from the Lienzo de Tlaxcala, which is a historical narrative or story from the 16th century. This is a scene in which Cortez is shown seated on a throne, so he's the guy in black right there. And it depicts the arrival of the Spanish in Tlaxcala. That's Tlaxcala, considering I likely just butchered the pronunciation of that. So you can see he's sitting there on a throne and kind of lording it over all the native peoples there. So Cortez continues on. He persuades or forces many of the Aztecs' natural enemies to join with him in the conquistadors as they march on the Aztec capital city. Through persuasion, he's able to enter with his forces into Tenochtitlan, or Mexico City, in a peaceful manner. He befriends the emperor and gains control of the Aztecs' gold and silver mines. So like I said, he kind of takes over. Pizarro is going to lead a group of conquistadors from Panama to Peru, and they're going to take care of the Incan Empire. Alright, so the Columbian Exchange. So, although I highly dispute that Christopher Columbus discovered America, although that's what's being taught to 1 million kids across the world, what I don't dispute is the benefits of him arriving here in the New World, or in Central and South America, and really kind of alerting the Europeans to the existence of the natives, and the existence of things that they were not used to. The Americas and Europe are very different as far as what's indigenous. A lot of different plants and animals and diseases and things like that. And so through Columbus's original trip and all his future voyages, it really starts a cultural exchange between the old and the new world, and that is why it's kind of given the name the Columbian Exchange. So you have animals that are new to the old world. So when we say old world, we're talking Europe. When we say new world, we're talking the Americas. So animals new to the old world. So from the Americas, Europe gets the flying squirrel, the iguana, catfish, rattlesnake, and armadillos. The New World, I think, probably gets the better end of the deal. Over here, we get horses and cattle and pigs, sheep, and goats. Domesticated animals that can be used for milk, can be used for meat, and a lot of other things. As far as plants are concerned, the Americas bring corn, potatoes, peanuts, peppers, and pumpkins over to Europe. And they bring over coffee, olives, wheat, and rice, which I always find interesting considering some of the largest coffee plantations in the world are in South America. Alright, as far as devices are concerned, so the natives of the New World showed the Old World canoes and snowshoes, hammocks, the game of lacrosse. And then the New World shows tobacco and a lot of different drugs. So diseases new to the New World. It's going to include smallpox, the bubonic plague, malaria, and yellow fever. Fantastic, huh? And these diseases really end up killing more Native Americans than any other thing that did. So diseases are really what ended much of the lifestyle of the Native Americans. All right, so Spanish American. By the 16th century, Spanish settlements in the New World stretched from South America to the southern portion of North America. In order to maintain their civilizations, they started the encomienda system. So what is the encomienda system? Basically, they're rewarding faithful officers with land grants. And, so not just land, but the control of the neighboring villages and the Indian tribes. Not really sure how that works out, but basically they're getting themselves some native slaves. Spain hopes to be able to better cultivate its resources while at the same time establishing a support system for its missions. So this is kind of the introduction to slavery, the encomienda system. We're enslaving native peoples. But when they realized they can grow sugar over here, they've started it kind of over in the Canary Islands and stuff like that, bringing slaves over to the Canary Islands to help grow sugar. They realized they can do it here in the Americas. And so the population of Native Americans has been dwindling due to disease and hard work and all that kind of stuff. And so they've got these sugar plantations and they need to get people to work them. So they start importing African slaves who had already been exposed to all the diseases. So they've a much hardier stock. Through the various religious orders of Catholicism, they hope to establish a Christian empire in the New World. Differing methods exist for converting the heathen natives to Catholicism, but by the end of the 16th century, most believed it was easier to convert them by force than by persuasion. They said there's two ways to convert religion, by force and by kind of taking your time. So the very, 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 very slow way to the almost immediate way. Let's see. De las Casas. Bartolome de las Casas. He's a priest in Cuba. He's going to publish his account of the Spaniards' treatment of the natives, which is going to lead the Spanish crown to reconsider their colonial policy in the New World. The Spanish are not treating the natives very well at all. And the Spanish really become known for their violent natures. Okay. Spanish exploration of the mainland, so we're talking up into North America and into the inner areas. Because if you look at the map, most of the initial experiences are on islands or on coastal lines. So you can see they kind of travel up into North America through Santa Fe, New Mexico area. They come up here through the Gulf, up into Mississippi and all that. And then you've got them in Florida as well. Okay, so Spanish exploration in North America. So Spanish settlements, they don't really take hold in North America as fast as they had in Central America. A lot of that has to do with the fact that they don't have the types of established civilizations that they had in South America. So there are civilizations, there are plenty of natives here in North American United States. They just weren't as large. I mean, they were not numbering in the millions by any stretch of the imagination, usually the tens of thousands, and on the rare instance, much larger. So in Central America, the Spaniards, they move into pre-existing cities, they take them over. In the north, they don't really have anything to take over, so that causes a problem. Nomadic lifestyle, the lack of precious resources in North America kind of prevent them from doing anything like that, and for them being able to sustain really a viable settlement, which is why you don't see as much Spanish influence in North America as you do in South America. As corruption and wealth grow among the conquistadors, the encomienda system would be replaced with the hacienda. So instead of a city, a smaller farm or ranch would be overseen by an appointed bureaucrat. And it would not stop Spanish settlers from seeking their fame and fortune in North America. So even though they're kind of living down there, they do continue to explore and to try and settle up there. You have Juan Ponce de Leon, who establishes a short-lived colony on the Carolina coast. Hernando de Soto travels up the Mississippi and Arkansas rivers. Francisco Vasquez de Coronado, he would search New Mexico following rumors of gold. Alright. Let's see. Okay, so this is a Spanish mission in New Mexico, and it was established to spread the Catholic faith among the indigenous peoples. And so around the Southwest, you do see a lot of things like this, a lot of missions. You also see them in places like San Antonio. San Antonio has a ton of missions from the early Spanish settlers. Alright, so many of the early Spanish settlement in what is now the United States were established as buffers to French, English, and Russian settlements that kind of just surrounded them. St. Augustine, which is in Florida, was created on the southern end of Florida to protect Spanish settlements from the French Huguenots, or the Protestants, who had established colonies in the New World in present-day South Carolina. So they were trying to kind of create a buffer between South Carolina and Central and South America. Okay, so the mission. So Spaniards in the first permanent settlements in the Southwest were more eager to pacify the Native Americans there than to conquer them. They therefore established missions in order to convert them to Catholicism and to civilize them. So they went the slow way. So the missions were there to kind of try and teach the word and get people converted that way. You have Juan Oñate. He's given a land grant, which is present-day New Mexico. He brutally puts down a rebellion of Pueblo Indians that year and decreed that all Pueblo males over the age of 25 should have 1 foot severed to remind the Native Americans what would happen if they chose to rebel again. So Juan de Oñate, not a nice guy. Let's see. The horse becomes very important to the Plains Indians because one of their most useful tools and weapons. And they become so valuable that they intensified intertribal warfare as the Indians fought for their control. So, let's see. We have the Plains Indians. This is a horse-stealing raid depicted in this hide. Demonstrates the essential role horses play in the Plains life. Alright. So challenges to the Spanish Empire. So French efforts. So you have Giovanni de Verrazano. He explores the coast in 1524. Follows the solidification of the Protestant Reformation. The French and the English are really kind of trying to stop the rise of Spanish power. So Giovanni, he does attempt to discover a western passage through to India. He is not lucky. He's not able to do that. You have Jacques Cartier, who would explore the Gulf of St. Lawrence in Canada, and he would travel up the St. Lawrence River between Canada and Canada and New York, not New Mexico, New York. After that, the French become mired in religious wars and they lose interest in the area. Alright, so this is English, French, and Dutch exploration. So, let's see. You have right here. Okay, so Drake, Raleigh, Cabot, and Gilbert are going to be French. No, I'm sorry. Those are going to be Italian. You've got Verrazano, Cartier, who are French, and then Hudson, who's English. So you can see most of them go up here to North America. Drake is the only one who kind of travels all the way around. Makes it all the way around. Okay. Alright. So the Netherlands, they passed the Spanish control and revolt against that rule in 1567. Spanish rule in the Netherlands lasted until 1648. Queen Elizabeth, she tries to subvert the policies of the Spanish, but she does not. She wants to stop it, but she doesn't really want to fight with them. So she walks a fine line with her privateers led by John Hawkins and Francis Drake. Elizabeth's most dire threat to her throne comes in the form of the Spanish Armada, which was dispatched in 1588 to defeat the British Navy and remove Elizabeth as queen. You have the Invincible Armada, was destroyed in a storm on the way, so clearly not all that invincible. With the Armada thus defeated, England gained a free hand to establish settlements in the New World. So this is when the English, start settling North America. Queen Elizabeth is one of the first ones to send people out to settle. All right, this is Queen Elizabeth. This is here in her coronation robes in 1559. Remember, she was the youngest daughter of King Henry VIII. Her mother, Anne Boleyn, was beheaded for supposed adultery. The English go to Virginia first, so this is them arriving on the Outer Banks, Roanoke Islands on the left there. Let's see, Sir Humphrey Gilbert and Sir Walter Raleigh. So Gilbert's going to secure a patent to establish a colony in the New World, which I have always found interesting. But anyway, so after 2 failed attempts, he is lost at sea. His half-brother, Sir Walter Raleigh, establishes a colony in present-day North Carolina, then goes back to England. When he goes back there 3 years later, the colony is gone. No one really knows what happened, but there is some recent evidence saying that there was a drought, which likely means that people starved to death. But the colony was never found. Nobody really knows what happened. It's one of those mysteries of life. I think that's all. Okay, we did this in class already, so no worries there. And I think that is everything for this chapter. So we'll speak again during chapter 2. Have a good day.